Welcome to Your Biz, Your Rules, the podcast for business-minded go-getters hosted by me, your favourite brain and biz coach, Daire Paddy. This is the spot for those of you ready to blend heart and head, woo and do, income and impact, change and chill, and so much more. So grab yourself a cuppa and let's get started. Hello friends and welcome to episode 232 of Your Biz, Your Rules. As promised, this week we are back with the second instalment of Rebecca Hawkes' interview. So last week, you will know if you've already checked out that episode, I welcomed Rebecca onto the podcast to talk about some of the rules that she likes to break with her business. And I think that there were aspects of that can really apply to so many of us, especially if you have ever felt the pressure to always be visible, always be present, while not really wanting to, while wanting to pull back, while wanting to withdraw and take care of yourself and not be, social all the time. So if that's something that you can relate to, I highly recommend you go give that one a listen. I mean, of course, we dove into so much more as well, but that's what we kicked off with. And like I said, I think it's something that is relevant for most of us because none of us want to be plugged in 24/7. I know I certainly don't. Now, without further ado, let's dive into part 2 of the interview. Here you go. We are going to dive straight in because I'm really excited for the topic we have planned today. So, Rebecca, tell us, what is one rule that you've either created or adopted in your business?
Oh, wow. I feel like over the past few years, the past year especially, I've been trying to create loads of new rules for myself. But I think the one that I really wanted to talk about is working when the energy is there and not trying to force yourself when you don't feel like doing what you're doing. And I know some people will be like, yeah, but sometimes you have to force yourself to do things because, I don't know, maybe a bill's got to be paid or you need to get this piece of content out. But I find that whenever I try and make myself do something when the energy isn't there, it doesn't come out very well in the first place. So then I'm like, well, now I want to re-record it, or re-record it or rewrite it. And it just doesn't feel good. And because it doesn't feel good, it takes me so much longer. Whereas if the energy is there and the excitement is there and the passion is there in that moment, I can get something done really quick and it can be amazing and it can be really valuable for my audience. And I much prefer to run my business in that way, in a way that feels good and is going to produce the most valuable stuff for people, than in a way where it always feels like an uphill battle and my content is just going to be like half-assed, or my courses are just going to be half-assed. I don't really want to do that.
And I think it's sort of leftovers from the days when maybe we had to answer to somebody else. So if you had a career prior to starting your business, obviously in that dynamic, you have managers, you have a boss, and you are beholden to what they want and what they say. And I think a lot of us just absorb that way of working. And then even if consciously we know it's not the same, on some level, we keep operating like that.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree. I think it's that. And I think as well, there's the we see it from people online. We see it from other coaches, from other professionals online that have their own businesses, that talk about having their daily schedule mapped out and talk about doing all their tasks and talk about having to be on social media every day. And I know we talked about this briefly in the previous episode, but like having to be on social media every day or having to do all these things to grow their business. And sometimes I'm like, I just don't want to do that because it doesn't feel good. And I do fall into that trap. I've realized it recently where I will give myself like a self-imposed deadline. And I will be like, for example, my podcast last week, I was like, I've got to get this edited. It was like 11 o'clock at night. And I was like, but the podcast has to go out at 7:30 tomorrow morning. And I had about 12 minutes left to edit it. And I was sat there and I was like, this isn't my definition of success. This does not feel good to me right now. Why am trying to get this out at 7:30 tomorrow morning? Why do I need to do that? It doesn't need to be out at 7:30. I post on a Monday and a Thursday. So why not 7:30 at night? And kind of catching yourself in those moments where you're like, oh, this doesn't feel good. I think is really important. So yeah, I shut the laptop and was like, nope, doing it in the morning. And then did.
I also wonder if maybe this sort of forcing energy in business is connected to a lack of trust. Like, do we not trust ourselves? Do we not trust that we will like do the thing at some point?
Yes, absolutely. I can absolutely see how they kind of connect together. And I've noticed patterns in myself when I am doubting myself, if I've got imposter syndrome, when I'm struggling to make a decision. And that now I think could sometimes be like ADHD related. That's when I will then try and force myself to do the things, or when I will say to myself, well, this has to be done now, this has got to go out now, or this has to go out tomorrow. Or I might have written myself a list of tasks that I wanted to achieve at the start of the week, and then be like, but all these things I've got to achieve this week. Yet in the moments where I feel really good about myself and where I am in that complete trust energy and I'm kind of relaxed and going with the flow, nothing seems to matter. I'm like, well, if I create a blog post this week, amazing, that'll be good. If I don't get it done, it's not the end of the world. And I can really see the difference when I'm in the energy of trust and when I'm not in the energy of trust. And I think the aim for me, especially now that I know that, is always to try and shift back into trust as much as possible. And it's not something that you can be in 100% of the time, but it's something that you can have that awareness around and be like, oh, if I'm struggling to make this decision, or if I'm pushing these, like forcing myself to do these things, is it because I don't trust myself? Okay, great. Well, instead of forcing myself to do that, how can I shift back into the energy of trust and then doing something that will align you back with yourself and your like inner wisdom, I guess.
So what are some of the ways that you do that when you're, having one of those moments and you acknowledge that maybe you need to make that transition back to trust? What do you actually do?
I knew you were going to ask me that. It really depends. Sometimes I just need to take a break. Sometimes I just need to switch everything off, put on Netflix or go for a walk or have a bath or have a nap in the afternoon to just, sometimes it's because I feel tired and it's because I've got so much going on in my head. I just need to completely decompress and switch off. Other times it might be that I journal and I might ask my intuition and say, what's going on right now? Or how can I trust myself more now? Or why am I not trusting myself now? And when I look at the reasons that I'm not trusting myself, I can be like, okay, well, if I'm trusting myself because I'm comparing myself to others online, what can I do to stop comparing myself to online? And how can I go back to focusing on myself again? Sometimes it might be doing like a meditation or an energy healing. I might do something like EFT or do like a breathwork class, anything to kind of physically shift the energy. I think that's always the best way to physically shift my energy, to focus more on how my body is feeling and get out of my head, and kind of back into my body, because that's always when I feel most connected to myself. And when I feel that sense of self-connection, I trust myself on such a deeper level than when my body and my mind and everything feels disconnected.
I know in last week's episode, we talked about the importance of self-awareness and how that really is such a linchpin for so much in our lives and our businesses. And I think that's relevant here too, because similarly to what you were saying, when I feel like that, when I feel, like I'm maybe not trusting myself, I tend to catastrophize. Like that's my pattern. So I will doom and gloom it up. I will, worry about 101 different results of me taking or not taking a particular action. It's just worry, worry, worry on a cycle. And so that's what I investigate in my journal. I'll ask myself, like, what am I worried about? And often I'll write like pages and pages. That I will have lists for days about things that I will worry about. But then I like go through every single one of them. And I use, I don't know if you're familiar with this, but Byron Katie's 4 questions.
Okay, no, I don't.
So you look at a statement, and it doesn't necessarily just have to be about worries, but you look at a statement and you ask 4 questions. Number 1, is it true? Number 2, can you absolutely know that it's true? Number 3, how do you react when this thing happens or when you think this thought, like depending on what the statement is, and who would you be without this thought?
So powerful.
And I mean, it can be a long process if, like me, you do write 4 pages of worries, but it shifts them. It shifts so much, and it helps me then just get back on track and really come back to a place of deciding from like this stable, steady spot, what is it that I actually want to do today? How do I actually want to show up? How do I want to be spending my time?
That's so, so powerful. And it's so good when you're kind of in that energy of what do I want? Like, how do I want to be showing up? Because you are focusing back on yourself, as you said, like you're back in your own mind and you're not listening to any outside voices or opinions or thoughts or anything else. You're kind of back with yourself and you're like, okay, I am now choosing what I want. And there's so much power in like knowing that you get to make the choice.
Mm-hmm. And I, at the same time, I completely get that sometimes you can feel very overwhelmed by all of the things that you think you have to do.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, as the owner of the business, like all of the things that we're deciding we have to do, they are choices. And so sometimes it can be quite hard to sort of untangle what we actually want to do and what we've decided that we should do or decided what we need to do. So I'll do a similar process as the one I just mentioned, but this time answering the question, like, what do I need to do? And I'll write them all down, then I'll ask those questions again. So is this true? Like, do I actually need to do this? And like, universe, like when I ask that question, the answer is always going to be yes. So I move on to the second question, which is, can I absolutely know this is true? Like, will I die if I don't do this thing? And then just carrying on with the rest of the questions. And that for me is such a powerful tool just to interrupt the way that I'm thinking, especially when I start spiraling.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that interruption is key, isn't it? Like when you're so lost in all the thoughts and everything that's going on in your mind, being able to do something that does interrupt it, whether it's like moving your energy, whether it's taking a break, whether it's using that process, it can stop the thoughts. And then you can come back and kind of focus a bit more. And I think sometimes it comes from, like for me, it's this idea that everything has to be done today. Like this almost like urge and this rush of all the things need to be done this week, or all the things have to be done really quickly. Like I couldn't possibly have this content idea and then create the content in a week's time. Like it's got to be done now. And this almost like compulsion to get things done really, really fast, when that's very rarely the case. Like, as you say, like I'm not going to die if I don't write this blog post today, or I'm not going to die if I don't record this podcast episode or whatever it is. Like we can be patient. We don't have to do all the things in one go, or all the things in this tiny little time period that we impose on ourselves.
I feel like we can't talk about this topic without also discussing consistency. And I know you're like giggling there because we've talked about this already once this week, but when you adopt this approach, when you decide, I'm only going to work when the energy is there, naturally it is going to have a ripple effect on your ability to be consistent, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And consistency is like that holy grail that we've all been indoctrinated to believe that we need to be seeking beyond all else. Let's talk about
that. I am so over the word consistency. I am very much how we kind of talked in the last episode about how I've redefined success for myself, and redefined what it means to be successful. This is something that I'm in the process of doing with the word consistency, because for so many years it had been drilled into me that I need to be consistent, and that's how I'm going to be successful, and I'm not consistent, so of course this isn't working or that isn't working. I'm so sick of it, because I recently, I feel like I've mentioned this so many times now, but I really haven't. I recently discovered that it's very, very likely that I have ADHD. So consistency is not possible for me in the way that it's expected. And I think I've always thought of consistency as being, you have to be on social media every day. Like, to me, when somebody says the word consistency, I'm like, social media every day. And I am so sick to death of hearing about it. But there are ways that you can be consistent that doesn't involve you being on social media every day. And that's kind of what I've started to do for myself. So things like setting up my Pinterest in the background. I use a tool called Tailwind. So my Pinterest is growing all the time. Traffic is constantly going to my website every single day. But I'm not sat there driving traffic to every day. I've got it running in the background. Likewise, when I know that I want to be more consistent on social media, or I want regular content going out on social media, I might schedule some posts. I haven't done that for a while because I felt a bit uninspired and a bit over social media. But there are kind of ways that I am being consistent, just not in the way that I suppose everybody else talks about it.
I also feel like we need to ask the question, like, why do you want to be consistent?
Yeah, absolutely. That's such a good thing to think about. Like, for me, I feel like I've always wanted to be consistent because the people pleaser in me is like, but all these people are telling you that you need to be consistent. All these people want you to be consistent. In terms of being successful, you have to be consistent. So try and be consistent. But that it just doesn't work for me. For years, I've been consistent for weeks or months on end, and then I hit a point where I crash, or I feel uninspired, or I'm so over social media. Especially as I was previously a social media manager, I would spend so many hours on social media for my clients. I would be exhausted by it. And then, because I wasn't then posting every day or regularly, I would beat myself up and I would feel guilty, and I would have this overwhelming sense of shame that I wasn't good enough. Like, I'm not a good enough business owner because I'm not consistent. I'm not a good enough coach because I'm not consistent. Like, I'm not good enough in anything because I'm not consistent. And now I'm just like, I don't feel the need to be consistent in the way that it's projected at us, I suppose.
So for me, I think my desire for consistency came out of wanting to feel steady, wanting to feel stable. Like, I knew what I was doing, I knew what was coming. I could sort of, especially back in the day, I could sort of know based on what I was putting out there, what sales I'd be making, what would be coming in. And it was just this, steadiness, this ticking over, not having to deal with, highs and lows and like the chaos that can come with income when, that starts taking place in your business. And so when I asked that question, like, why is it that I want consistency? Immediately what came to mind is because I want to feel steady. Like, I want to feel stable in my business. And so my follow-up question is, okay, what makes you feel steady? What makes you feel stable? And like, I can promise you, not one single thing on that page in my journal mentioned creating content consistently. Like, that is not what makes me feel steady. That is not what makes me feel stable. So like, again, like, investigating your brain a little bit, asking yourself questions can be really, really helpful when you're trying to sort of unlearn behaviors and redefine your way of working.
Yeah, absolutely. That's so interesting that you say that. And I think as well, what was I going to say on the word consistency then? Like how you were saying about consistency for you is kind of giving you that steadiness. Before, you said obviously it's like steadiness to you is not creating social media content. For me, consistency actually feels really constricting. Like, I'm very much like I don't like to feel constricted by a schedule, by things that I need to do on a daily basis, by anything. I like to feel like I've got the freedom to do whatever I want whenever I want. So by saying that I need to be consistent on social media, it almost brings this like heavy energy of, well, that means I need to be doing something every single day that I don't necessarily feel like doing every single day. And it feels like it doesn't feel like steady and safe to me. It feels like being told what I need to be doing. And I don't like that.
It's interesting though, because nowhere in the word consistency does it include the word daily.
I know.
And like something that I know about you is that you like to batch your podcast episodes because it gives you that sense of freedom.
Mm-hmm.
Because you've got a stockpile and you can schedule them, they're good to go, you're covered, and it creates that sense of freedom. Like you're able to grow your online presence without having to actually be present.
Yeah.
And that's still consistent.
It is. I think it's like looking at and this is still something that I'm unpicking, this whole idea of like what consistency means to me, because I do, when I hear consistency, I very much go to the daily thing. Like when people talk about consistent selling, I'm like, oh, that's daily selling. Or when they talk about like consistently being on social media, I'm like, oh, that's showing up on social media every day. Or like consistently working on your mindset, I'm like, oh, that's like a morning routine that happens every day. So yeah, it's very interesting because no, it doesn't mean every day at all.
So the way that I've started reframing this for me, because I like similarly to you, like I've gone through a little bit of a roller coaster this year where I've just wanted to like throw all of my toys out of the pram and just stop listening to everybody else. So the way that I have sort of started redefining consistency for me is when it's needed. So I do something when it's needed. So I'll post on social media when it's needed. I will podcast when it's needed. I will go to the gym when it's needed. Like whatever it is, whatever the habit is, instead of saying consistently, I tell myself I'll do it when it's needed.
Oh, I like that. And you've just made it, even in saying like I am consistent with things like going to my Pilates class every Thursday morning. I go to my Pilates class. Things like that, I don't feel constricted by. That's still consistent. But yeah, I like the whole idea of when it's needed. And I think for me, adding the when it feels good is really important, because I know that I'm so much better when things feel good for me. I don't produce my best content. I don't show up my best. I feel resentful of what I'm doing if things don't feel good to me.
Yeah, that's big. So maybe for you, it's just reminding yourself that it's not daily. Like a daily prison is not what consistency really means.
No, absolutely not. Absolutely.
I don't think we're built to do anything daily other than like eat and sleep.
No, I don't think so, because our energies are different every day. Like I don't wake up feeling amazing every single day. So therefore I don't feel like doing the same thing every day. Even like as like women, with our cycles, our energies fluctuate because of our hormones and because of our menstrual cycles on a monthly basis, which is funny because that's a consistent thing. But so our energies are going to ebb and flow. So we're not going to physically be able to do the same things every day. Like even I've read recently, when it comes to working out, there's different types of exercises that are more beneficial for women depending on what time of the month you are. So when you're coming on your period, HIIT workouts are not necessarily going to be the best thing for you, but a gentle yoga class might. I don't know where this has come from because I forgot what the question was.
But that is definitely an approach that we can take to business as well.
Yeah.
Because it's such like a Henry Ford 9 to 5 old paradigm way of thinking that we have to, do the same thing at the same time every day of the week. Like that's not the kind of business that we have to create, because we do get to create the kind of business that we want to actually be in. Like that's the dream, isn't it? And so that means that we can also be visible in the ways we want. If that means we go through a phase of doing a YouTube video every week, cool. But then maybe we'll go through a phase of doing Instagram stories daily, and then another phase of doing something else, and like we can layer these things and switch things up. Like, who decided that we have to pick one thing and do that one thing forever at a perfectly regulated pace?
Yes, absolutely. It is that kind of old narrative that we've always kind of grown up with, even in like the way that we're raised, where we like go to school for 5 days a week, and we have the same kind of lessons regularly, and we have like our lunch breaks at a certain time, and it's all kind of embedded in us that this is what we need to do. We need structure, we need to eat at the same times, we need to learn like the whole thing, whereas that's not the case at all. And now, like, looking back, I'm like, how did I ever survive working in a 9 to 5 when my energy fluctuates so much? Like, there'll be some weeks where I can work like 10-hour days, easy peasy, don't get exhausted, not a problem, get a ton done. And there are some weeks where if I like get out of bed to work, that's a massive achievement. Where some weeks I might just put a post up on Instagram, or all I do is like record a podcast episode because that's all I've got the energy to do. How I ever survived like working and doing the same tasks and getting up at the same time every day for my 9 to 5, I do not know.
So I saw this meme on Instagram earlier, and because I know in the last episode we were talking about you being a projector. I'm a manifester in human design, and there was this meme of basically someone looking like they were dying, and the caption was like, "A manifestor being told what to do." And it feels so accurate. And I didn't realize at the time, like when I was employed, and then also when I used to work behind the scenes in other people's businesses, when there was that dynamic of somebody else being in charge of what I had to do and when I had to do it, I low level felt like I was dying. I felt like I couldn't breathe fully. I felt like I could not move away from my desk. So I would eat at my desk every day. I would do my like journaling and stuff at my desk. Like, I wouldn't even just go and sit on the couch. I would do it at my desk. And I never even noticed that was a problem until I stopped. And like when I did stop, I was like, why does life feel so weird now? Like, what is all of this like breath in my body? Like, what's going on?
It's so funny how we kind of bring that into our businesses, isn't it? So strange. I suppose it's just the conditioning though, isn't it? And it's just stuff that we have to unlearn and rewrite the rules for ourselves.
Yeah, and like bringing us full circle. I know for me at the start, it was a lot about not trusting myself. Like I think I decided that I didn't have the self-discipline to work from bed or to work in my pajamas or anything like that. So I brought a lot of my 9 to 5 practices to my home when I started working from home.
Yeah, that's so interesting. I feel like I've kind of always some of the best content that I create is when I've like got straight out of bed and I'm in my pajamas and I like haven't even had a drink yet. Or like the other day I recorded a podcast episode in my towel because I got out of the shower and I was like, I need to record this now. And but then I think that's a projector thing as well, because I tend to work best when I'm in like cozy environments like the sofa or my bed, or I'm in pajamas. So I wonder if that's the human design thing as well.
Well, so one of mine as a manifestor is to like jump on the urges quickly. So if I get hit by inspiration, just do the thing. No like creating a strategy, no talking it out with people, just do it. And I do notice a shift in how I feel when I follow that strategy.
That's interesting.
And I know a lot of people are like very jealous of manifestors because of that, because they feel like they can't necessarily get things out as quickly. But I think all types have their own strengths, and it's really learning to work with yours that helps you get the best results. I love human design.
Yeah, it's still something that I'm like learning about, because I still don't know that much about it. But I know that my like strategy is waiting for the invitation, which is frustrating. And I feel like I always thrive so much more when I'm being like seen and my like gifts are being acknowledged. Whereas if that's not the case, and I think this is why I did so well in my previous 9 to 5 job, because I got so many awards for different things. I constantly had like really good feedback. I was listened to all the time, and I felt so successful in that job. Whereas when I am not being acknowledged for my knowledge or gifts or skills or whatever, I get so bitter, and I find it really hard to get rid of that bitterness, because I'm like, why can't you see how good I am?
Okay, so I'm going to share a few things with you because I've had quite a few projector clients.
Mm-hmm.
You're basically all the same, you people. So, here are some tips for you. Number one, waiting for the invitation doesn't mean you literally have to sit there and wait until somebody asks you a question. You can create the opportunity for an invitation by asking other people questions. So by like sharing things with people and asking them questions, or maybe doing bits of like market research with them and picking their brains, that's how you can inspire them to give you the invitation.
Okay, interesting.
And then another thing, when it comes to, you know, feeling validated and feeling celebrated, one really obvious thing is to make it just an automated part of your, you know, email sequences and onboarding and things like that, to get people to submit feedback, to get people to share testimonials, to, like, if you have Facebook groups for different programs, to have like win threads every week and things like that that just set up automatically will keep like feeding that for you. And then on a more personal level, you can, like, if you compliment other people and if you give other people words of affirmation, then they are so much more likely to give it back to you. So this is something that I used to do with one of my friends a while ago. We the first thing we would do in the morning is we would send each other a voice note, and we would share like a little list of gratitudes, like things we're grateful for, like, you know, just as we wake up. And one of them was always something about the other person. So like, I'm grateful that you blah, blah, blah. And having that be the first thing that you hear in the morning is just lovely. Like, it really like sets you up nicely for the day. And she's a projector also, so it really gave her the boost that she needed to have a sparkly projector day.
That's so cute. I love the idea of that. But then there's like this little part of me that's like still struggles on occasion to hear nice things about themselves.
Oh, it's completely like gross and uncomfortable, isn't it?
I try really, really hard, and I have got so much better at accepting compliments, because years ago I'd always be like, oh no, I look terrible, or like, this was just a cheap dress or whatever. And now I'm like, thank you for the nice thing. But there are still occasions where, especially when it's unexpected, I'm kind of like, oh, this feels so unnatural to receive this.
Mm-hmm. But if you feel like it's unnatural to receive kind words, how are you going to feel if someone just wants to give you a whole load of money?
I know. It's the same uncomfortableness. I don't know. I think I'm getting better with the money thing. I found like a £10 note on the floor the other day, and I was like, I will happily receive this. This is wonderful. Yeah. But yeah, it's all like, and this is kind of why I worked on like receiving compliments more, is because I know that it affects all areas of you receiving, like receiving clients into your business, receiving money, receiving positive things. Like, I don't know. Although I got like a free coffee the other day, because I was like, oh, do you know what? I'm opened. I literally, the day before, I was like, oh, I'm really excited about the surprise that the universe is going to give me this week. And then I went to bed last night and I had this voucher pop up on my phone, because I'd been to this cafe like 50 times. They were like, we've got a free drink for you. And I was like, oh, that's a lovely surprise. I will receive that with gratitude.
And something that I usually do, because you know I'm a big journaler, is if somebody gives me a compliment, I write it on the inside cover of my journal. So then every day when I open it in the morning, I don't necessarily read all of the compliments, but they're just like, they catch my eye for a moment, and it just has started getting me more comfortable receiving compliments. Because I noticed that for a really long time, I just didn't ask for testimonials, didn't ask for feedback, didn't ask for anything, because I didn't feel comfortable hearing really nice things, which is so stupid because they're so helpful when you're trying to market your business. But we all have these little internal dramas to deal with, don't we?
I know, we do. That's such a good idea. I've got like a feedback folder on my phone with just screenshots of like positive stuff. So I will go in there like fairly regularly, just have a little scroll and like feed my ego.
But it's not just feeding your ego, it's fueling your soul as a projector.
Yes. Yeah, it is. It does. It makes me feel good. And then it's almost like sometimes I need it. If I'm like struggling with like inspiration, or I feel like everything's taking a really long time, or I'm not where I want to be, I'll look at the feedback and I'll be like, okay, my mission is bigger than me. Like I am, like I'm showing up for people. I need to be showing up for people. I need to be putting out this content because it's helping people. This is my mission, and I need to almost like get over my own self, get over my own worries and doubts, and show up and serve and do the things, like put the stuff out there that needs to be heard and that is going to support people. And I find that reading the feedback really inspires me and can really motivate me to show up for myself and my business.
I love that. So there's one more thing that I wanted to ask you about working when the energy's there, which is, how do you deal with the people in your life when that has become your reality? Because I'm sure that it can be, challenging at times to, I don't know, not necessarily have them see you working in this new way, but maybe you feel guilty about working that new way, or you feel like you should be doing more. Like, do you have any tips or advice for people who are struggling with that, who maybe are on board with this idea of, following your energy with the amount you work, but have that old like people pleasing niggle in the back of their mind that's stopping them?
I think it's something that I'm very much working on. It's like a challenge regularly to remind myself that their thoughts and opinions are not determining how successful I am and how fulfilled I'm feeling in my business. It is a struggle. It's a massive struggle. And I think as well, like, I have for years constantly told myself that I'm lazy. So although I am choosing to work when the energy's there, when the energy's not there, I've spent a lot of time beating myself up because the energy's not there. And I think it really, in terms of like tips for that, I think having the self-awareness of these are the thoughts that I'm having, choosing not to have those thoughts and choosing to ignore those thoughts, and I'm constantly reassuring myself. If I'm having a low period, or if I'm having a day where I don't have the energy and I don't want to do anything, I'm constantly reassuring myself and saying, but you know that you're going to feel better at some stage. Like, this is going to pass. You're going to have the energy. You're going to show up. Like, just because you're feeling this way this time does not mean that that's it. You're never going to be able to run your business again, or does not mean you're never going to be able to produce a piece of content again. And I try and look back on previous times where I've hit that same crash, and I've taken the time off and I've listened to my body and I've accepted it for what it is. And then I see the results that I've achieved afterwards, and results in terms of like the work that I'm able to produce afterwards and the way that I'm able to show up afterwards. And I can see how much of an impact it has on me when I do listen to myself and when I do honor that energy. So it's very hard to not let other people's opinions kind of dictate how you should be working. But I think having some sort of understanding and some sort of compassion, because they have those thoughts, because they've been conditioned in the same way that we've been conditioned. We've all been conditioned in the way that we are supposed to work a 9 to 5, or we are supposed to work X amount of hours each day, or we're supposed to do X, Y, and Z. They've been conditioned in that way. So having some kind of compassion for them and understanding and saying, okay, I know that they are reacting this way. For example, like, my partner is getting annoyed with me because I haven't worked this much because he's been conditioned in this way, or he doesn't understand me because he's been conditioned in this way. It stops any feelings of resentment and anger towards the other person, and those feelings can kind of exacerbate the situation even more, because you're either going to listen to that other person's thoughts and feelings and not honor your energy, or you're going to honor your energy but then have a difficult relationship or a difficult period with your relationship with that person. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
Okay, good.
It does. And I think it's really helpful to remember this, whether you physically like share space with someone else or not, if you live with them, or if it's people that you just interact with online, if it's people that you're connected with online, because those relationships can have just as much of an impact on how you feel about yourself and your work as the ones who are literally in the room with you.
Yeah, absolutely. I have that with like my nan and granddad. Like I don't live with them, but whenever I'm having a day where I'm not doing a lot, and I'll perhaps see them in the evening, and granddad will be like, "Oh, have you had a productive day?" And I'm like, "Oh God, I can't tell him that I sat and watched Netflix for 3 hours, had a bath in the middle of the afternoon, and then napped." Like I can't tell him that because he spent all these years like
Hey,
working.
that is very productive. That's multiple episodes watched. That's
Clean
that's
hair.
sweet. Absolutely.
But then but I think I'm really lucky in the respect that I am able, when I honor the energy that's there, I'm able to achieve a hell of a lot in a really short space of time. Like I could achieve a week's worth of work in 5 hours when the right energy is there. Whereas when I choose not to honor that, it might take me 4 weeks to achieve what could have taken me 2 hours if I'd like honored the energy.
I think it's also worth like adding a word of caution around assuming you know what other people are thinking.
Yes.
Because like that, I mean, there will probably be people in your life who do have an opinion and who will make diggy little comments that aren't needed. But there will also be people who genuinely feel neutral when it comes to how much you do or do not work or how you spend your time. But even if they do feel neutral, we can often start projecting and assuming that they maybe are judging us or assuming that they're sort of annoyed with us about it or whatever. I know that that's something that I've dealt with in the past with Tom, with my other half. I I don't know why, but I just decided that he would like judge me if I was taking time off. So if I was ill and couldn't really work, I would be like super productive around the house, like cleaning and cooking and all of that stuff. Because deep down I thought that he would like be judging me for not working when he's out at work. And honestly, like Tom could not give fewer shits about my work hours. It's not something he asks about. It's not something he's aware of. Like he genuinely doesn't care. But for some reason, I had decided that he does, and I was letting that determine how I was then showing up for myself.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I relate to that so much. I've done the same things with the cleaning and been like, oh my God, I've got to do something. And one of the things that I learned from, I think it was Brené Brown, she said something about when you're having these like internal thoughts, or I mean, I think when she spoke about it, it was about having a conversation with another person. But for me, I've started to do it with my own internal thoughts. If I notice that my brain is going, oh, if you haven't done this, then granddad's going to think X, Y, or Z, or mum's going to think this about you, I'll reframe it and I'll say to myself, okay, the story I'm telling myself is mum's going to think this, this, that, and the other. But she hasn't actually said that to me. We haven't had that conversation. I don't know what she's saying. So it's just a story. And using that, the story I'm telling myself part has made a huge difference in helping me to shift the thoughts and not get too lost in them. And I have to constantly like remember to come back to that.
It sounds like a great tool for sort of disconnecting from the emotional charge of the thought.
Yeah, absolutely. It helps kind of neutralize it a bit more so that you don't have that like the feelings in your body of, oh my God, this is what they're thinking and this is going to happen, and that kind of anxious energy.
I love that. So to wrap up, our final question: what is a song that makes you feel like your best self?
Oh, such a good question. Oh my God. I have got multiple playlists packed full of songs that make me feel really good about myself. Oh no, on the spot. I feel like one I've been listening to, it always ones that like I can really sing along to. So like the Greatest Showman song I was listening to yesterday, like the the Greatest Show one, whatever that's called. I might just be called
It's
the Greatest
just called
one.
The Greatest Show.
Yeah. Florence and the Machine, My Love, and then there's another one that I can't remember off the top of my head. Anything by Years and Years. I've been listening to Metallica's Master of Puppets because I'm obsessed with Stranger Things, so I've been listening to that a lot. Anything that I can really sing along to, and it really depends on my mood. Sometimes it'll be like rap music because I feel really empowered when I listen to that. Sometimes it'll be like heavy metal, sometimes it'll just be like pop music. My tastes are all over the place, but yeah, anything that I can sing and kind of like dance to, because I feel like it shifts my physical energy and it just makes me feel so good.
Love that. Well, all of those will be added to the Your Biz, Your Rules playlist. So guys, check the show notes for that. And Rebecca, thank you so much for joining me these past 2 weeks. I feel like there's been so much good stuff in both of these episodes. And listeners, as always, like what I always say is, yes, listen to this stuff, take in this stuff, but then do something with it. So take one tip, one idea, and actually implement it right away, because we are not here on earth just to be these constant receptacles for other people's thoughts. Like, it has to be useful to us. So take a tip, take something that Rebecca or I have said, and then take action.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for having me. It's been amazing.
Thank you for being here. I hope you loved listening to this episode as much as I loved recording it. I really do thoroughly enjoy putting together these interview episodes, not just because I get to chit chat with some of my very favorite people, but because I get to learn something too. It's not just about me, having my opinion and broadcasting my views. I get to absorb some of the genius from the people that I'm connected to, which is amazing. Now, as you will recall, Rebecca and I are actually joining forces to run an in-person retreat in January of 2023. And we are currently making the first spots available to our waitlist. So if you want a cheeky head start on the masses, make sure you're on the waitlist. The link to that is in the show notes. I'll see you next week. Thank you for listening to Your Biz, Your Rules. I know that we all like to listen to podcasts, watch videos, read articles or books or posts on Facebook, and not really do anything with that information. So I want to challenge you right now. I want to challenge you to take something from this episode, anything, and use it to spark action. Use it to activate some kind of change in the way you work and the way you live. Do yourself this service today. And tell me all about it on Instagram. Hop over, shoot me a DM, or share an Instagram story showcasing what action you are taking thanks to this episode. And of course, do all of the usual things. Subscribe, leave a review, let me know how much you love the show, and I will be back with you next week.